All right. So everyone, welcome. This is our sixth annual East River Collaborative Winter Forum. We are really excited to have everyone here today. If the weather is any indication of why we do this virtually, among other reasons, I think you'll understand. So I hope everybody is warm and has a fresh cup of coffee and is ready to go for today. So for those of you that may not know me, my name is Carrie Hagenow. I work for the Nature Conservancy as a coastal resilience specialist, and I help to lead our work in the East River. I want to welcome you all. We'll hear updates today from work around the watershed and beyond. And we had nearly 90 people registered to join us this morning. So I want to take a moment to thank all of you for your interest and your partnership and your participation today. The goal of our winter forum is really to gather partners and members of our collaborative together to update on what we've accomplished in the past year, gather feedback if needed, keep momentum moving forward, and to learn from other people and places carrying out similar flood resilience work. So as we get started here today, I want to take a moment to recognize all of the other people behind the scenes that make this possible as well. You can see our core team shown on this slide. Helping to lead this work and my co-MC for today is Julia Nordyke from Wisconsin Sea Grant. Julia brings her expertise in strategic planning, coastal outreach, communications, and really partnership building to our collaborative. We also have Adam Beckley with Wisconsin Sea Grant, who, as you'll see in his presentation later, really carries out our role of moving modeling and everything data related forward. Angela Kowalczyk from Newater helps us secure critical funding for this work and provides project support for our team. And Jenny Foshi from the Nature Conservancy is our fellow who will be with us into May and is helping with our communications. And then last, but of course not least, Whitney Presby of the University of Wisconsin Division of Extension has been a critical resource for the social science and understanding the communities in which the East River is embedded. In addition, we've been fortunate to have this work supported through both public and private funding from the Wisconsin Coastal Management Program, the Fund for Lake Michigan, the Coastal States Organization, and the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. A lot of that funding underpinned by NOAA as well. We cannot thank them enough for their support and collaboration in our work. I want to take a second to highlight today's agenda. There's a link on our event page in the chat as well that will allow you to open the agenda. We've had a little rearranging in our order of speakers for our watershed lightning round. And I will add that Whitney Presby is not able to join us today, so Julia will be filling in for her on our agenda. The rest remains the same, and we're excited to have Paul Skowinski from the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point joining us, as well as Andy Kaminsky from the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewage District, both of whom you'll hear from later this morning. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started. We have a lot of participants on our Zoom meeting today, so we ask that you keep yourself muted unless we invite you to come off of mute to ask a question. You can also let us know you have a question by raising your hand. If you'll see at the bottom of the bar, there's a react button for this option, or you can type your questions directly into the chat and we'll answer them. You'll be invited to use the chat box throughout the morning, so don't be shy, and we'll be adding relevant links there during presentations as well. Last, we know it's easy to get distracted during virtual meetings, but we kindly ask you to be present in our gathering here, approach today curious, ready to learn a few things, and to interact with our fellow East River Collaborative members. And building on that, we understand it can be hard to get to know each other in a partnership when we're doing virtual events. So I want to take a few minutes before we dive into our forum to do a speed networking activity, which I will turn over to Julia to facilitate.
Oh. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We've been doing this activity several years in a row. It's pretty fun. So it's basically 2 rounds, 3 minutes each of it's called impromptu networking. And basically we're going to break everyone out, the whole group out into random pairs. And you'll have a chance to talk to each other for about 3 minutes. We have some prompt, and then we will come back and then switch again for one more round. Some of the prompts to get you started, if you don't know the person, what's your affiliation and the role that relates to the East River Collaborative? And then we thought, it's the Olympic time of the Olympics. So what have you used the East River for recreation? What's been your favorite activity near the river? If you want to think of a winter Olympic sport that could happen training wise on the river, I would appreciate that. And so, yep, we are going to break out right now and then switch halfway. And if you find yourself in a room with nobody to talk to, feel free to jump back into the main room and you can talk to us or get reassigned to somebody else who joins us. So, okay. We are going to continue to transition into our next session. And what we are going to do is we're going to start off with East River Collaborative updates. And I encourage people to, if they have questions, to put them in the chat. And then as we go and if we have time, we can address them or, yeah, so we'll try that. So first up is my esteemed colleague, Adam Beckley. He's the Coastal Engineering Outreach Specialist at Wisconsin Sea Grant, and he's going to talk a little bit about give updates and progress on flood gauges in the East River and our bigger, broader goal of a flood warning system. All right, thanks.
Thanks, Julia. Yeah, so I'll be talking about progress towards developing a flood warning system for the East River. This is something, if you were at last year's forum, I talked about a little bit, and we've got been doing some work over the last year and got some updates to share. So we'll get into that. Next slide, please. So why do we need a flood warning system? So flood warning system will provide advanced warning of dangerous flood conditions from hours of advanced warning to maybe a few days. And you see here from the picture from the March 2019 flood, first responders really would have appreciated more advanced warning, would have helped them prepare for mobilizing and their mission, and certainly appreciate any more advanced warning they can get of dangerous conditions. But currently there's no flood warning system that exists on the East River that can provide that advanced warning, and I'll get into a little bit why and what we're doing about that next. So to kind of understand what we're doing, what goes into a flood warning system. So flood warning system primarily running from the National Weather Service. Starting on the left here, river flow gauge data provides information on the current levels of the river and how much water is moving through it. Also incorporating weather observation and forecast data, like how much rain is expected, temperatures that might impact snowmelt. That information is input into a computer model of the river, which can then sort of predict where the river might go, how high it might get to, how much water might flow through the river. That would be the flood forecast, that prediction of what the river is going to do. So then combining that with some local knowledge of what river levels cause problems where, that can be transferred into a flood warning when the river is expected to reach those critical levels that might cause damage or impacts. And that would be issued by the National Weather Service, giving the first responders, local governments, and even residents advance warning of those flood conditions. Next. So the status in the East River is currently the National Weather Service recognizes the need for this in the East River. They've developed that river forecast model, but we do not have enough river flow gauge data to calibrate that river forecast model to give confidence that those forecasts are correct. And when a warning is issued, that there's confidence that there's warning conditions. So what do we have so far? Next. So our existing gauges that we do have on the East River, we've got two of them. The first one is East River at Baird Street. This was funded by the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, and the funding for that actually ran out at the end of last September. But fortunately, because we were got a group together and started talking about it, we were talking to the U.S. Geological Survey, who runs these gauges. They were able to add that to the USGS Federal Priority Stream Gauge funding for this current fiscal year. So that provides an extra year of funding, but we'll still have to continue into the future to find funding to keep that gauge going. We can't really expect that funding for long term. The second gauge is at Highway ZZ. That has been there for over a decade, and that has GLRI funding for the foreseeable future. So we're good with that gauge, but one we've got to work on. Next. You'll notice there's kind of a big gap of information in the middle of the watershed. We currently don't have any data coming from any of Bower Creek, Bellevue, Alloway, Ledgeview, no gauging in there. So the National Weather Service would really appreciate more flow data, kind of where I put the letter A here. So it would measure flow from the East River and Bower Creek is a top priority for the National Weather Service modelers. And fortunately, we were able to work with the Great Lakes Observing System. We kind of told them about a need, and they found timely funding opportunity to install a gauge here. So that will hopefully be going in this spring or summer, and with 1 year of funding for operations. But we will need to find long-term funding for that to keep it going to support the flood warning system. But an exciting development nonetheless. Next. So next steps, we need to start building support for sustained long-term funding of these gauges. It's a consistent theme with those gauges, hey, we got a little bit of funding, but we need to keep that going. So that is kind of our project. We have got a small group working together to try and figure out what that long-term funding would be. If you would like to join that effort, please put your name in the chat, or you can reach out to me directly. I'll put my contact information in the chat. But thanks to everyone who's been working on this so far, and we'll keep it moving forward.
Thanks, Adam. That is a very exciting way to kick off this morning's update. So I really appreciate that. All right. And yeah, if you have questions, please throw them in the chat. Up next is Carrie. We'll welcome her back, Coastal Resilience Specialist at the Nature Conservancy, and she's going to give a little update on green infrastructure and local code and ordinance audits.
Thank you, Julia, and thanks, Adam. So I just wanted to provide a brief update on one of the projects I've been working on with 4 of our communities. That's Ledgeview, De Pere, Bellevue, and Alway, as well as our consultant, Julie Beth Hines from the University of California, San Diego. Julie Beth is nationally recognized in her field and comes with extensive knowledge in urban planning, water regulation, stormwater management, and green infrastructure. So she has many Northeastern Wisconsin ties through family and friends. And since 2012, she's consulted with the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewage District and with Sea Grant, among many others, helping over 30 communities in the Lake Michigan Basin to update their policies and ordinances to further the use of green infrastructure. So thanks to funding from the Fund for Lake Michigan, Julie Beth has been working with us for almost a year now to conduct green infrastructure code audits with these communities. And it's based on the general format and approach outlined in the publication that you see here, which is Tackling Barriers to Green Infrastructure. So last June, we held kickoff meetings and tours with all 4 communities, which helped us gain a common understanding of what the code audit process is and determine what relevant information could be shared between JB and the communities. I'm sorry, Julie Beth, who also goes by JB, what information can be shared between her and the communities that can be relevant to moving the process forward. So since those kickoff meetings, Julie Beth and her team have reviewed each community's codes and plans and policies and have done a comparison with neighboring communities. Some examples of the things being reviewed in this audit as they relate to green infrastructure are things like landscaping requirements, minimum parking standards, and allowances for permeable surfacing or natural lawns, obviously among many other aspects. In the end of this process, Julie Beth is going to provide detailed recommendations on how each community can update their codes to remove barriers or to promote green infrastructure. And the project itself is scheduled to wrap up mid-year this year, so stay tuned. And then in addition to the audits themselves, we're also working with another consultant to do a flow path analysis for the lower and upper subwatersheds of the East River. This analysis will help us understand how stormwater travels across land and identify locations for green infrastructure. It'll also help determine kind of where water accumulates on the landscape and where care needs to be taken when it comes to development or landscaping. The map that's shown here is the same analysis from the city of Bayfield, in northern Wisconsin. Each color represents how many acres of drainage that flow path collects. And I'm not going to go into more detail on that now. I believe we're going to have a link in the chat that tells more about Bayfield's analysis if you're interested. But this will also help us inform our decision support tool that we still are working on. And we also hope to engage in the near future with each of the community's public works department in the coming months to kind of talk about this project more deeply. So if that's you, keep an eye out for communications from me very soon. And that is all I have for updates. I will pass it back to Julia to give an update on our residential needs assessment project.
Well, good morning. Okay, again. Um, again, sorry. I had something else on the count schedule before me, but that's okay. We'll talk a little bit about this is Whitney Presby was going to be here this morning, and unfortunately she couldn't make it, which is a big bummer, but she is helping lead this is part of a two kind of approach project to build community engagement and outreach capacity for the East River Collaborative in the municipalities. And you're going to hear another part in just a minute from Wello. But this is we're about to launch in the next couple of weeks a flood survey, which is aimed at residents. Our survey covers experiences with flooding and the impacts, such as frequency, damage. There's several questions focused on health. And then also it covers solutions and to reduce the impacts of flooding, indoor, outdoor, what people would like to see in their neighborhoods, and even programs in their municipalities. And then also the last thing we're looking for input about is how people get information about flooding, whether they know what code red is, 211, where they trusted sources of information for flooding. The survey is going to be sent out to the residents in the 100-year floodplain. And so that's approximately 3,000 residents. And we hope to have results back, the data in, and do data collection, and by the end of the spring, and we'll have a final report to release later this summer. Okay, so with that, I am going to hand it over to Natalie Bomstad. Welcome, Natalie from Wello. Again, she's taken, her organization has done a great job taking that first step to really build that community capacity residential engagement. So, and she's the executive director of Wello. Sorry, I didn't want to forget that.
Thanks, Julia. So nice to be with everyone here this morning. First, just want to thank the entire ERC core team. It's been a real pleasure to be able to collaborate on this project and really think about some of those resident perspectives on the East River flooding. Again, as Julia mentioned, as kind of this complementary piece of what I'll be talking about a little bit today is some of those deep dive one-on-one qualitative interviews, and be able to kind of bridge that together with that full resident needs assessment. So really appreciate the opportunity. Just a slight background, my name is Natalie. I am the executive director of Wello. If you're unfamiliar with Wello, we are an organization based in Green Bay, Wisconsin that focuses on community health and well-being. So we're really interested in all things related to well-being, including the impacts of flooding on folks in terms of their housing conditions, kind of the economic impacts, as well as those health impacts. So what you see on your screen here, I believe this will be the full packet of information will be shared with you. So I won't go through it line by line, but I do want to kind of highlight a couple key pieces of what we were able to complete with the ERC core team last year. Our intention was to be able to get some, do those deep dive interviews with folks who have experienced flooding. So we were able to reach out within our networks and really use some snowball sampling techniques to really get to folks who have in the past experienced flooding on the East River, are currently experiencing those things as well. Some of the key themes that really emerged from the impacts of flooding really revolved around kind of 5 key themes. The first was around property and economic impact. And it was really interesting because the folks that we were able to interview from a property standpoint, some had landlords and lived in kind of a duplex type setting. Some were in rented units, and some owned their own homes. Really, what we saw from those folks who were renting, some of the real challenges of flooding from that landlord conversations, a lot of the renters were actually responsible for some of that mediation, and they felt like there were some opportunities to potentially help support those who are renting when flooding occurs. So property and economic impact was a huge theme. The second theme was really around relocation decisions. So almost everyone, I think everyone said that flooding had really impacted their decision on whether or not they should stay in their community. But the alternative piece is that people felt very strongly about their communities. And there was this sense of, it's really hard for me to stay in my current housing condition because of the flooding. And I don't feel like I should leave because and actually an actual quote was, I don't want to pass this problem on to the next person, to the next buyer, right? And I really like my community. So really kind of feeling kind of pulled in those directions. One of the third key themes was around recreation and community life. So as we all are aware, on the East River, there is that beautiful East River Trail. So many folks use that for recreation, and others also really use it as a corridor for transportation. And so when we're experiencing flooding, what ends up happening is if that is closed down, where are those next areas that people have to go, and what are the conditions of those areas? And I'll touch on that in a moment. The fourth key theme was really around mental health and stress. So everyone that we spoke to, really, this was a theme that came up multiple times. When there is a big rain event, people really described, feeling that anxiety of, is my basement going to flood? Am I going to come home and am I going to have damage to my property? So that constant feeling of kind of being on edge was something that really came up multiple times. And then the fifth was really around health impacts. So for many of the folks that we were able to interview, they have experienced flooding in their homes. And they talked about having varying degrees of understanding of what type of mold remediation should we do? What's the right PPE? Where do we go for that? Is there a place in the community that can help support us in achieving some of those things? So as we are looking through themes, then the last kind of piece of the actual report really goes through, what were some potential solutions that were surfaced? Again, these were directly from the residents themselves. The first was really around community infrastructure. And I had mentioned that, when places along the river are flooded, right, people still need to get around. So what are the areas adjacent look like? One of those areas is really Baird Street in particular, for those of you who are familiar with the area. And, one of the concerns was when the river is flooded, if then a lot of that traffic, a lot of that transportation goes to Baird Street, what is the condition of Baird Street? And currently, there's some opportunities, I think, there to ensure that street is well done and can actually accommodate some of that overflow. The second solution was really around housing supports or household supports and kind of affordability. One of the things that was interesting, it came up many times, was when we asked about kind of insurance or flood insurance, many folks, either they had it, but they weren't using it, or they didn't have it. And they spoke a lot about affordability of flood insurance. Many folks had described how they had used the flood insurance before, but then their premiums went up and they were no longer able to afford it. So then others started to just not file claims. And so as we think about kind of some of the data pieces that we might be collecting, just recognizing that there is a little bit of that not using it, right? So it might not necessarily surface in kind of that claims kind of data set. Education awareness, in particular about not only what to do if there's flooding, but what are some of the things that we can do to prevent that? And I think looking at the agenda here today, I think that there's a couple different opportunities there, and really wanting to kind of ensure that education, that awareness is really a community-wide awareness. Health interventions was that fourth solution. So again, really thinking about, is there an opportunity, like can we activate places like our Brown County libraries or some of these different places where you could check out some of those dehumidifiers or some of those pieces that can be helpful in the event that someone is experiencing flooding in their home. And there's multiple different costs associated with that. Not all that can be covered by that homeowner. Is there kind of a sharing economy that can be activated to help with some of those health pieces? And then in terms of facility resilience, so that was another potential solution. So really thinking about those facilities, those parks, those trails. We just heard about some green infrastructure. Is there an opportunity to kind of combine some of those pieces into where we know that we're more prone to have flooding and have that be a potential solution? So overall, feel free to take a peek through the report and let us know if you have any questions. I think I certainly felt from all the residents that it was something that for folks living along that corridor, it is top of mind every day. And it is something of great importance. So appreciate everyone's participation on this call to really try to identify some opportunities and strategies to help support folks in those neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. We do have a couple minutes here just in case there's questions. We saved some time questions. We thought maybe people might have questions for Natalie specifically, but if there's other questions, feel free to raise your hand or put them in the chat and we can call on you. Okay. All right. Well, without that, if you think of something, we will definitely get back to you. And I guess we will move right along here. Let's see. Adam, I think if you want to just answer this really quick, because it's been a question a couple times.
Yeah, there's been a couple questions about what's the annual cost for River Gauge. And so, like I mentioned, it's the U.S. Geological Survey who operates these gauges. The annual cost is around $19,000 per year, and that covers keeping the gauge running and 24 hours a day service if it goes down, getting it back up, as well as they come out and do measurements of the flow in the river routinely throughout the year to help ensure the accuracy of the gauge. So a total of $19,000 a year, roughly, for each of those locations. And then there's also a question about the cost to install. That was around $29,000 to install a gauge. And so, like I said, we were able to work with the Great Lakes Observing System to get that taken care of. So we need those annual costs is what we're working towards.
Great. Thank you.
And then I guess we just had another question. Major flooding in 2019 was not typical because the river was ice and we had major rains in March. How does the monitoring for flooding work when the river is frozen? So that's a great question. So that is something that when the National Weather Service builds their river forecast model, they are able to incorporate those sorts of processes in the flooding model. And so the river gauging provides that baseline data to say the river is this high. And then they're able to use their computer model to kind of account for those different sources of flooding and how they'll interact on other pieces, the level of the bay. So that's also incorporated into the model. So if the bay lake level is high versus low, that factors in. And then Melissa, it's a question, how long does the river need to be monitored to calibrate the forecast model? So what I've been told by the Weather Service is ideally, in a perfect world, they would have 5 years of flow data to calibrate their model and give confidence that it's running. But certain high priority areas, they can start to issue forecasts before they get the full 5 years of data, with appropriate caveats given to what the local forecast offices, and kind of this is not as calibrated as we would ideally like, but we could get going on it and start to issue forecasts. How many gauges on the East River will entitle a warning system? So what the Weather Service has said is getting that third gauge will be enough for them to get going on it. So really the missing piece right now is that there's not information in the middle of the watershed about how much water is moving through. We only have that Highway ZZ kind of up in the more rural area and then right down by the bay, and we're sort of missing that piece in the middle. So once we get a third gauge, that should be enough to have a good, accurate warning system. And Dan Teeter's 2018 and 2019 were extremely wet years with high water levels. Many conditions came together to create that event. Yep. And again, that's that forecast model will incorporate soil moisture. So thinking of, have we had rainfall before? Things like that. Obviously, it's a model is only as good as what goes in and out, so it won't be perfect, but trying to account for as many of those conditions as possible. So it's not just the gauge. And Jason from National Weather Service is here to save me for all the things I'm maybe glossing over. Go ahead, Jason.
No, you're right on the money. We had somebody do a study here between GBY, which is at the Fox River, mouth of the Fox River, and the Baird Street gauge, and the correlation was really high. And then we have the Greenleaf gauge, and the correlation to that not high at all. So to have something in the middle of the watershed, which would kind of make up for the attenuation that happens from Greenleaf by the time it reaches the East River, is really ideal. I mean, we were talking about Hoffman, but in the study said that wouldn't work, but Alloway is great. It's right in the middle of the watershed, and it catches Bower Creek as well. So we just need to get the funding beyond this year, but at least we can start with something, and we'll start running those correlations, as quickly as we can.
Thanks, Jason.
Yep.
Great. Thank you. That was excellent. Excellent questions. Thanks for sharing that knowledge. And we are right on time to move forward. I'm going to first ask to see if Chad Atkinson is on and ready to start. Chad, if you can start your video. Oops, that's me. Sorry, you're all going to have to fumble. Multitasking with spotlighting people is becoming a little bit of a challenge. So maybe I can ask if Chad is not ready, my colleague Adam.
It looks like Chad disappeared. Or are you here, Chad?
Ben, can we spotlight Ben? Ben.
Oh, there's Chad. Sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, it's
all right. All right. All right. Okay. Well, great. I'm glad you're here, Chad. Welcome. Chad is the mitigation section supervisor for the Wisconsin Emergency Management. And he is just going to give a brief update about what's going on with hazard mitigation. So put some questions in the chat for Chad.
Or don't. You don't have to, but I'll happily take them. Yeah. Hi, everyone. I am Chad Atkinson. I supervise the hazard mitigation section at Wisconsin Emergency Management. Appreciate your time here today. Just want to talk a little bit about what's happening in hazard mitigation and some projects in the immediate area. So next slide, please. Just so we're all on the same page, when we're talking about hazard mitigation, according to FEMA, hazard mitigation is any long-term sustained action that's taken to reduce or eliminate a risk to life or property. And why I am so happy or so invested in mitigation is that it is not only does it save lives and properties, it is a good financial investment, right? So back in 2019, the National Institute of Building Sciences did a very deep dive on return on investment. And what they found was that on average, for every dollar of federal assistance that was put into hazard mitigation, there was a return of $6 in value. And as I say, that's an average. So there are even higher returns on things like doing planning, higher building codes, or floodplain codes like we have here in Wisconsin. But I think the takeaway here is just that this makes good financial sense, and it makes good sense in terms of life and property. So next slide. So what we do at Wisconsin Emergency Management, as far as hazard mitigation, most of our strategies are funded by federal assistance and one state program. And there is a lot of uncertainty right now in what role federal assistance will play in hazard mitigation moving forward. So there is a hazard mitigation grant program that is typically available, or has been historically available, following a federally declared disaster. So unfortunately, just this summer, we had a federally declared disaster down in the southeast of Wisconsin, in the Milwaukee area, with the flooding. We requested hazard mitigation grant assistance, and that request was denied, and we're currently under appeal. And that has been repeated a number of times across the country. So we are not seeing that program being granted as of late. There is also the Flood Mitigation Assistance Program, which in the past was an annual grant program available for communities and properties that participated in the National Flood Insurance Program. But as of 2024, we did not see that notice of funding opportunity come out, and we haven't seen a notice of funding opportunity for 2025. So that's it's unknown what the future of that program is. The other one is the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities program, BRIC. That was again an annual program made available to do hazard mitigation projects and plans. In 2024, that was announced that it was canceled. State of Wisconsin and several other states sued the federal government and got a positive ruling that it could not be canceled. So it is currently in a state of flux at the moment. And then there is a legislative pre-disaster mitigation program, or what's called congressionally designated spending. Used to be called earmarks, and then they didn't want to call it earmarks anymore, but it's still called earmark, where members of Congress could put projects in for specific funding. We have high hopes that we've seen a couple of projects in should the full budget be approved, that we may get some additional programs soon. And then at the state level, a couple of years ago, for the 2023-2025 biennial budget at the state level, we included a pre-disaster flood resilience grant of $2 million. We spent all $2 million in 2025, and there's one project in Green Bay that I'll just mention quickly. And in the most recent biennial budget, we got another $2 million. And so that's turned out to be a very popular program, and certainly very necessary in this time of uncertainty with federal assistance. So next slide, please. Some current projects currently happening in and around the watershed area. So Brown County is currently updating their hazard mitigation plan. That's being done under a federal fiscal year 23 BRIC grant. The total project cost was $24,000. That's a 75-25 split. So federal share was $18,000. Non-federal $6,000. The hazard mitigation plans make the county and any participating agencies eligible to be sub-applicants for federal assistance, which, as I just mentioned, some of that federal assistance is a little uncertain, but let's hope that that uncertainty goes away in the future. And so having a hazard mitigation plan in place is great. Certainly the planning process and bringing stakeholders together is very important. And the added benefit is hopefully being eligible for assistance in the future. And then we do have a couple of those pre-disaster flood resilient grants. So Bay Lake Regional Planning Commission is doing a Northeast Wisconsin flood vulnerability assessment. So not specific to kind of the East River, but to the area in and around, where they're looking at areas that have been vulnerable to flooding and what that might mean. And then I believe we will shortly have a presentation on East River wetland restoration by the city of Green Bay. That was also funded under the state fiscal year 2025 PDFRG program. State share is at the max that we could provide, which was $250,000. And the non-state share is $1.3 million. But so not a large portion of the total grant, but if you can get $250,000, why not do that and decrease? So next slide.
And Chad, I'm sorry if we are kind of out of time for this slide.
Okay.
So if there's something you want to just summarize really quick on this slide, that would be appreciated.
Yep. So those are just a couple of examples, other projects available. Takeaway here is if you have a thought about if there's a threat or a hazard, please reach out to us and we will talk and see if we can find a tool that best meets your need.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it. Definitely throw some questions in the chat for Chad. Okay, moving right along. And I do want to just mention really quick, the East River Collaborative would be nothing without our partners and all these updates and your participation and engagement in the collaborative. So really appreciate all of you presenting today. So next up is Ben Krumenauer. Been working on it this morning. He's the village administrator for the town of Bellevue, the village of Bellevue. I'm so sorry. And he's going to give us a brief update about what's going on with that.
Well, thank you, Julie, and I appreciate everybody's time today. I only have 3 slides, and one of them's in front of you right now, so pretty quick and simple from Bellevue. But as we transition to that next slide, Bellevue, as I've mentioned over the last couple of years, is continuing to tackle one of those really big things out there. We, like everybody else, are very responsive to the water quality needs of the East River as well as the greater Fox Wolf watershed. And I talked to some great folks today on what they're up to and things. But for Bellevue in the last little bit, we've done quite a bit. We've tackled 4 publicly created stormwater retention facilities. So retention meaning that they're holding water not just for flood, but also for treatment factor. Dry ponds are great, but dry ponds are meant to drain out, and that doesn't clean the water like we like to do. We have helped to enhance 2 existing ponds, and one right next to our beautiful Village Hall building, and that pond was enhanced by a $30 piece of plastic, where we could increase the water capacity for flooding, but also increase the treatment factor by letting that water take longer to get to the end drainage point, which is water settles or dirt settles. And then we permitted 4 privately funded basins. So what does this mean for the group? That means that Bellevue has met our NR 151 requirements for total suspended solids. That means that passive measures such as these basins are doing a larger benefit than what they were before, and we can start to target our active measures like street sweeping or future leaf pickup or other things for more targeted benefits to the region as a whole. We have funded or been a part of almost $10 million worth of projects in the last couple of years, which is great. Looking ahead, we see continued funding. We're continuing to support internal grant programs, thanks in part to a new staff member we added, Mr. Gage Granger, who is our stormwater code enforcement individual, and he does a good job educating our team. Additionally, we are looking at 6 to 8 new public or private basins being added because of new subdivision growth or other pieces. And while the requirement is generally 1-for-1 treatment and flood control, these basins are a little bit above that thanks to other requirements. On the next slide, we're looking at some of our recreation pieces that we're enhancing and being a part of. And East River Trail is more than just treating water and making a conveyance of drainage, but it's also for a benefit of recreation, from kayak rental stations that were installed at one of our park facilities next to our kayak launch to little mini beautification efforts with little pocket parks in a commerce and commercial area near Costco and Landmark and Murno and everything in between. The village is actively working on these. And we do those through robust plan developments. So we've updated various plans and pieces to help see these things go together. And I just want to give a little shout out to some of my teammates that are on the call today, our village board members. I see Trustee Krull is on here too, and everybody else that's on our village board and decision-making bodies. Without their support, we wouldn't see these things happen. So we have a good team here, and Bellevue is excited to be a part of it. And Julia, I'll leave it at that, and contact information is here if you need me. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Ben. Really appreciate that. Exciting stuff happening in the Village of Bellevue. All right. Up next is Adam Wazak. He is the Director of Parks and Recreation and Forestry at the town of Ledgeview. Welcome, Adam.
Thank you much. I appreciate the invite to talk today. I enjoyed this time of year, getting to reconnect with everyone and seeing what everyone's working on and what they've been able to accomplish over the last year. So as mentioned, my name is Adam Wazak. I'm the Parks, Rec, and Forestry Director for the town of Ledgeview. We're here to talk about an exciting project we have kind of started to undertake regarding the acquisition of about a 33-acre parcel along the East River on our northern border, just south of Osprey Point. And if we can move on to the next slide. As mentioned, this is a 33-acre site. We were able to purchase this from the Dennis family in beginning of 2025, in part due to grant funding received through the NRDA. Ultimately, this site has been mentioned and called out in a lot of the plans and studies around the watershed that have been completed for the last over the last decade. Mainly because it really is the last uncut riparian hardwood forest that we see in the lower watershed. Just some absolutely incredible sugar, red maple, white oak, bur oak, basswoods, about 27 acres of untouched native hardwood forest, which is awesome. It's got an oxbow remnants as well as prior wetlands that were there prior to it being its long farming history. Great, super exciting parcel. Obviously, it does have its challenges like any natural area that we have here in our state. We're dealing with large quantities of buckthorn, Phragmites, Areca canary grass, and everything far few in between. We're seeing quite a bit of erosion along the riverbank, and also we have the battle of pending development both to the west and to the south of the site. If you can move on to the next slide, please. So since acquisition in early 2025, our town board and park committee has been working pretty hard on putting together a master vision for this site. Now, this is not a management plan for the property, but rather it's a high-level concept to get our community to understand kind of what our visions are for the site long-term, and to get that interest and essentially, try to get people excited about all the effort that we're going to be spending out here over the next couple of years, trying to get things cleaned up and get this property to its full potential. As you can see here, ultimately, it's a very passive site long-term. We do want to allow for public access eventually through both improved and semi-improved trails. We see this site as an opportunity for outdoor education, just because of the high environmental value that it holds in our watershed. We want people to get out there, engage with it, learn from it, and hopefully, inspire the next generation of of stewards, right? So if you move on to the next slide, please. Kind of our goals for the property obviously are start with restoration. So as I mentioned, we're dealing with quite a bit of acres of buckthorn, Phragmites, reed canary grass. So that's kind of our first kind of crack at this, and we're fortunate to be partnering with Brown County and their phase 2 of the water trail project. So a lot of the invasive species mitigation efforts are going to be started with Brown County and their contractors this winter, going into the hardwoods and taking the first swat at the buckthorn. And then from there, putting together a management plan for how we're going to deal with the rest of the property and get everything cleaned up and, like I said, get it to its highest potential. As I mentioned, access and education are a big component of this project, of this property. So we'll be working over the next couple of years to develop a plan for getting access in there and getting some of those improvements so that everyone in the community can enjoy this site and learn from it. As far as that, I do want to give a shout out to the Nature Conservancy, because they were obviously they played a huge role in the town being able to acquire this property, and it's been a great partner thus far through it. So we're looking forward to seeing this property kind of grow from what it is. And if anyone's ever interested in stopping out there, seeing it, feel free to reach out to me. I love spending time out there. I'd be happy to walk you around.
Excellent, Adam. That is fantastic news. Congratulations to the town of Ledgeview. Really great. All right, rolling right along here. Up next is Melissa Schmitz. She is the Resiliency Coordinator for the City of Green Bay. Welcome, Melissa.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, asking us to speak today. I probably have more slides here that I will be able to cover. So if I don't get to everything, I can send you the slide deck and you can review it and ask me questions afterwards. Today, Sierra and I are going to talk about our East River and Baird Creek projects that we have going on. The picture that you see on this cover slide is the confluence of where Baird's Creek meets the East River, right across from East High School. And in the background, you can see Sullivan Park. Next slide. This slide is just to illustrate the two projects that I'll be talking about. I'll first talk about Emily Park, which is the park in the southern part of the slide on the western half of the western side of the river. And then the one up above is Van Beaver Park. Next slide. So where we're at right now with Emily Park, wetland restoration and creation, and I use those terms because there are historic wetlands that are in the park. We found this out during our wetland delineation work that was done last year, but there'll also be new wetlands created as well. So at this time, we're in the due diligence and final design phase, which we call the 90 to 100% design phase. It started last fall and will continue through this summer. Right now, we are actively monitoring groundwater. We have 6 groundwater monitoring wells set up in the park. And this picture shows our consultant in the yellow jacket is teaching 2 of our utility staff, Adam Mead and McKenna Beach, how to monitor the groundwater monitoring wells, retrieve the data on them. They go out there, I believe, on a monthly basis to download the data. And this will help inform the depths at which we're able to do the wetland scrapes in the park. The cost for this phase is $123,000, and it's being funded through the city's some ARPA funding and also that Wisconsin Emergency Management Pre-Disaster Flood Grant that Chad talked about. And our engineer is EOR. Next slide. So this is just an overview rendering of what Emily Park will look like. We have, it'll create approximately 11 acres of wetland area and 35 new acre feet of flood storage. It's anticipated to reduce the flood stage by 1.2 inches, which I know does not sound like a lot, but sometimes that can make a huge difference in whether that's at your back doorstep or going into your basement. One of the messages we like to tell the residents is that this project alone is not going to solve all of the flooding problems. It's going to take a lot of work throughout the watershed. We'll also, as a part of this project, have additional trails added within the park. The existing East River Trail will remain in the same location, but we'll have new pathways of getting there. In addition, the Emily Street will be reduced into just a cul-de-sac parking area, and then there'll be a boardwalk that goes across the park, linking it to the new trail. And some of the other trails will just be mowed grass paths. And there'll be 2 river access viewing points, one at the south of the park and then one at the northern end of the park. That'll be wide stone steps leading down to the river. Next slide. Here's another rendering that was just updated last week. Gives you another viewpoint. The inflow outflow, there's 2 points, one near the southern, there's like that blue dashed line. You'll see that's one of the inflow outflow points going out to the river, and then one in the northern end of the park as well. We're also going to have some areas for stormwater treatment at the end of Grinion Street and at the end of Emily Street, going into the created wetlands, so that we're able to reduce some of the burden on the stormwater system, as well as get treatment for the stormwater, instead of having it go directly into the East River as it does right now. Next slide. You can skip this slide. Van Beaver Park, on the opposite side of the river, we've already completed our 30% and 60% designs. We're currently in the 60 to 90% design process. This is about double the size in terms of flood storage. So 71 acre-feet storage is the projection. And our partner on this is the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative. If you haven't had the chance to work with them, I encourage you to, oh, that was my timer, get involved with them. All of our engineering work is covered through the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative through a NOAA grant. So up to this point, the city has not paid for any of the engineering work for Van Beaver Park. And if you could just skip to my last slide, I just wanted to thank our funders, Julia, and some of the technical resources that we have. But the city stormwater utility, ARPA, Fund for Lake Michigan, Wisconsin Coastal Management, the Wisconsin Emergency Management, Knowles Nelson Stewardship Grant Program, and Army Corps of Engineers. Thank you.
Great job, Melissa. Thanks so much for sharing those wonderful updates as well. And as we welcome on to the camera here, we have Sierra Urbanic. She's from the city of Green Bay. She's an engineering aide in the Department of Parks, Rec, and Forestry. So welcome, Sierra.
Hi, everyone. I'm actually now a utility engineer with the City for Public Works. I'm going to be talking about a project at Baird Creek. Next slide. There's actually 2 separate locations for this project. We have Burgundy Court and Twin Pines Court. So just to orient us, you have the Fox River on the left, and then to the right of that is the East River, and then you'll have Baird Creek coming into the East River to the east. Then between Burgundy Court and Twin Pines, you'll see I-43. Next slide. So this is not a new problem, but this project really got started in 2022, 2023, actually with the homeowners of Burgundy Court and Twin Pines Court. They expressed concerns for the easement behind their homes. Their concern was erosion, loss of trees and vegetation behind their homes, sediment. And they brought these concerns to their alderperson. And their alder, Jim Hutchinson, was actually the link between the homeowners and the city and really helped this project move forward. So each project had a little bit different approach. This would be the cross section for Burgundy Court. If you look here, the dotted line would actually be where the original slope would be. And you can see that has been cut back, which made it less steep, allowing water to be slowed down, more infiltration. And then in the middle there, you'll see the bank bottom, which was reinforced using riprap. And instead of continuing that up to the banks, we chose to use a more natural material just for sustainable. It's more sustainable and more cost effective. And those materials would be coconut fiber emat, green arbor stabilization, which is shown in the right-hand corner, and a native seed mix. Next slide, please. And then at Twin Pines, again, a more natural design. We used 8 rock weirs instead of riprap throughout the channel. And then erosion rolls paired with live stake plantings, which is shown in the left corner. Basically, this is a more developed plant. It's root bound. It's going to develop faster. We chose to use elderberry plants. Next slide. So right now, this project is currently under construction. There's no work until spring right now. So this project is also being funded through a grant through the American Rescue Plan Act in the amount of $651,000, with the remaining funds being funded through the Green Bay Stormwater Utility Fund. The consultant for this was Ruckert and Milky, and the contractor is Advanced Construction. Next slide. So the first picture on the left is from wetland delineation done by Ruckert and Milky. And then the second photo, just this past fall, is from the second week of constructions, just getting things started. And then the third photo was the end of construction right before snow started to fall. And you'll notice there's a big gap between the end of the design and when we kicked off construction. I'm going to talk about that on the next slide. So a couple of the issues we ran into, the bids came in exceeding the amount of grant funding, which really forced us to come up with more money, which ultimately came from the stormwater utility. Twin Pines also had wetlands, and unfortunately, due to additional cost and the permits we would need, we couldn't do any work in that area, which is unfortunate again, because most of the erosion was actually happening in that area. So we really had to work upstream of that. And then for oak trees, both sites had oak trees, and we were trying to protect as many trees as possible. And due to oak wilt protections, that pushed our project to October. Next slide. Really the impact, 900 feet of creek bank was restored. That slows the flow of water, allowing for drainage and infiltration, reducing sediment deposition, and preventing future erosion. Next slide, please. And then looking forward to spring of 2026, finally restoring the site. It's planned to have a woodland prairie seed mix applied and doing the live stake elderberry plants at Twin Pines, and then ongoing maintenance in the future. Next slide. And that's all I have.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sierra. Congratulations on your new role and position at the city. And what an inspiring set of projects this year. I am pretty pumped for moving forward here. All right, I'm switching it over to Carrie. You want to take us into break for a minute?
Yes, thanks, Julia. We are just a few minutes behind schedule, but I think that's okay. Really appreciate all of the updates that were provided by our partners here. So we are going to go into a 5-minute break. I'll just mention quickly, there's been a lot of great questions and things in the chat. So if you have a chance, feel free to go back and scroll through that and answers to those questions as well. And I'll also mention before we go into the break, when we reconvene in 5 minutes, we will be jumping back in with a little interactive East River trivia. So during the break, I'm going to have up on the screen some instructions for logging into that, which I will go talk through when we come back from the break as well. But if you feel, if you've used Kahoot before and you feel tech savvy, feel free to get logged into that as you come back. So with that, we will reconvene at 10:19. I want to make sure folks get a full 5 minutes for coffee refills. Thanks, everyone. We are at 5 minutes. I know that goes by really quick. So thanks for everybody coming back and joining us. We're going to ease back in with some fun East River trivia. And we're going to be using a website called Kahoot. And you can play along by following the link that is in the chat. And then when prompted, enter that game pin, which you're also seeing on the screen there in front of you. You can join us on your computer or on a mobile device. If you're using your mobile device, you can also join directly by scanning the QR code that's shown on the screen right now. And I see many of you entering, so I hope I have it set up right. Once you enter that game pin, you'll be prompted to enter your name or a nickname for yourself. Everybody will see that, so appropriate names only. Kahoot is competitive, so you'll want to answer the question both correctly and as quickly as possible to get the most points if you're a competitive person. So when I start the quiz, it'll show us the first question for 10 seconds. I'll read it out loud, and then a screen will appear with 4 multiple choice answers. You will select those on your mobile device or on your computer. So you'll have 20 seconds on this screen to select your answer. Again, you want to try to get it right, but also do it quickly. And then after each question, we'll be able to see who our points leader is. And then I'll add a little more context and info about the correct answer to that question. So with that, it looks like we have about 23 people who have joined in. As I start the quiz, if you're still working on getting connected, the game pin and everything will still appear at the bottom of the screen. So feel free to join late if you're having trouble connecting. And I see a few more people coming in. I'll give it just a second to start. Welcome, Peaches. All right. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We're going to start our quiz. Hopefully this is displaying correctly for everybody. This is the first time I'm doing this. 3, 2, 1. So our first question is going to come up. The East River flows south to north for how many miles? There are your options. They should also appear on the screen of your computer or mobile device. We have 13 seconds left to answer. The East River flows south to north for how many miles? I see almost 30 people. All right, everybody answered. So it looks like 42 is our correct answer. 9 of you had that right. All right, now we're going to see a scoreboard. If for those that are keeping track, Melissa, you must have been quick on this one. And a little more context. So if you're unfamiliar, 42 miles beginning in the unincorporated community of Askeaton within the town of Holland, and the river ends at its confluence with the Fox River in the city of Green Bay. All right, next question, rapid fire. What percentage of the East River watershed is under tree canopy? How much is under the canopy of trees? 14 seconds. Lots of fast answers here. I feel like we have some competitive people amongst us. 6, 5 seconds left. All right, everybody got their answers in. The correct answer is 22.6%. Looks like about a third of us got that right. All right. How is our leaderboard doing? Shannon moving on up, and Sierra also. Good job, guys. Little more fun facts. So the 22.6% is under tree canopy. Of course, that canopy can be found in any of our land uses. The watershed covers a total of 147 square miles. 55% of that is in agricultural land use, 25% being urban, and 20% being natural area. And these facts and others can be found on our story map on our East River Collaborative site. Don't go look at it now. Third question, what is the name of the large wildlife area found in the East River watershed? We have Brillion Wildlife Area, Killsnake Wildlife Area, Green Bay West Shores, or Holland. 12 seconds left. Lots of answers coming in. All right. 5 seconds left if you're still struggling to figure it out. All right. And it looks like almost half of us got that right. It is the Holland Wildlife Area. Brillion and Killsnake actually are not in the East River watershed, but just south of it. Shannon, still in the lead. Good job. A little more info if you're not familiar with the Holland Wildlife Area. It's 536 acres. It is in the headwaters of the East River watershed, obviously in the town of Holland. And it includes the Holland Red Maple Swamp State Natural Area. So you can see from this poor map, perhaps, that it's just east of County Highway PP if you're ever interested in visiting. All right. The flood in what year was the most damaging in Green Bay history after 56-mile-per-hour winds pushed water upriver? So we're looking for the year of one of the most impactful floods in East River history. Whoa, you guys are fast. I feel like I would take way too much time thinking about this. I'm glad I'm emceeing and not under the pressure. All right. Ooh, 12 of you said 2019 is actually 1952. Let's see how that impacted our leaderboard. Man, Shannon still up at the top. Melissa also hanging in there, and Ingrid on your way up. All right, so the 1952 flood, which occurred in April, forced an estimated 1,000 residents from their homes. And it was really, as we've talked about already, that combination of heavy rain, strong winds, and an ice jam that actually formed at the mouth of the East River where it meets the Fox. All right. Next question, what was the name of the settlement established on the banks of the East River in 1829? I am a history buff, so you guys have to put up with some history questions as well. Answers coming in a little slower on this one. What was the name of the settlement established in 1829? 5 seconds left. All right. And our answer, 7 got it right. Navarino. 16 said Fort Howard. Let's see our leaderboard. Maria jumping on up on that one. Shannon's still in the lead. So the answer is Navarino, which was platted by Daniel Whitney in 1829. That's a picture of the map there. If you can read that little text at the bottom, it actually gives you the clue that it's Navarino. It later became a borough of Green Bay when it was combined with Astor. I will say the town of Bellevue, that was actually created in I'm going to get my numbers wrong here, you guys. I have it in front of me, 1873. The town of Bellevue and Alloway were separated, and Bellevue now includes the area lying east of the river. Fort Howard was actually on the banks of the Fox River on the west side, and Shantytown, if you're unfamiliar with that, is in what is now Alloway, and it was a small settlement established in 1822 to serve Camp Smith, which is where Heritage Hill is now. So all of those places really existed. Another one for history buffs. What historical figure is rumored to have nearly lost his life on the East River? Theodore Roosevelt, George Custer, Zachary Taylor, or Jefferson Davis? We got to dig deep in the history books for this one. Although I did hear someone utter this fact on one of our tours. All right, 26 answers, 3 seconds left. The correct answer is Jefferson Davis. The Theodore Roosevelt connection would be cool. Let's see our leaderboard. Ingrid bounced up to our top spot. All right, so Jefferson Davis, this is according to Deborah Beaumont Martin's History of Brown County, Wisconsin, Past and Present. The excerpt is seen on your screen there. The story is he was visiting the nearby Fort Winnebago, and he went deer hunting on the river. After his boat capsized, his companion who was with him saved him. So a weird historical connection to the East River. And our last question, I believe, what is the record one-day precipitation total for Green Bay? This is the one-day total, which is slightly different than the 24-hour total, as this is a single day, not spanning multiple days. All right, 9 seconds left. Looks like we almost have all of our answers in. 3, 2, 1. All right. Ooh, 13 said 7.2 inches. It is actually 4.9 inches. The 4.9 inches, that's per the State Climatology Office. That event took place on June 22nd, 1990. If that date sounds familiar to you, it was a major flood in the East River. It led to a dramatic rescue of a teenager trapped under the Mason Street Bridge. There were people rescued from the Right Place parking lot. So that might be one we're a little familiar with. I will mention too, the other options that I gave for inches of rainfall are associated with our 10-year or 10% annual chance. That's 3.5 inches. We had 5.4 inches, which is our 1% annual chance of occurring. And the 7.2 inches is a 0.2 annual chance of occurring. For some comparison, the heavy rainfall that we saw in Waukesha and Milwaukee counties in August of last year was a new state record rainfall. And that was the highest total was 14.55 inches of rain that happened at Northwest Milwaukee. That blew the previous record out of the water. So all things considered, we have so far dodged a bullet in Northeast Wisconsin with only a record of 4.9 inches of rainfall. And let's see who our winners are before we move on. Third place, Shannon. You were rocking it the whole way through. Melissa came into second. And our top spot, who could it be? Ingrid. Awesome. Good job, guys. I hope you enjoyed that. I am going to turn it back over to Julia.
Excellent. I really enjoyed that. So, okay, without further ado, we're going to move on to the second half of the winter forum here. And we have two wonderful presenters lined up for everybody. And I'll just say that, you know, people probably don't know this, but we kind of have a theme every year. And so the first presenter is representing our theme from, and kind of full circle, our theme from 2025, which was nature-based solutions. And this year, then the next year's theme, 2026, will be focused on community engagement. So I'm going to welcome Paul Skowinski. He is the statewide citizen monitoring network educator with UW Extension, and I'm probably getting that UW Madison Extension and Stevens Point. I'm so sorry, Paul. Anyway, I had the pleasure of seeing Paul give a presentation last fall on pollinators, and he is just a wealth of expertise. This is not what he does as his day job. He works with volunteers across the state, developing monitoring protocols for lakes and water quality. But I am very excited to welcome him to the forum today, and I hope you really enjoy his expertise and throw questions in the chat. So, Paul.
Thank you, Julia. I'm going to try sharing my screen. Hopefully you can see it now. Looks good.
Looks great.
All right. All right. Thank you. Yeah, so my affiliation is a little complicated. I work for the Extension Lakes team at UW Stevens Point. Technically not part of UW Madison's division of Extension, although we're connected in various ways. And as Julia said, my main role at UWSP is managing the statewide Citizen Lake Monitoring Network, and I'm an outreach specialist for lakes statewide. I also teach aquatic botany at Stevens Point, and I am a former president of the Wild Ones chapter here in the central Wisconsin area. I've seen the Wild Ones name come up a couple of times today. So I really enjoy using native plants in all kinds of different gardening situations. Rain gardens being really my favorite because there's so many things that they can do all at one time, including stormwater management. So the photo that you see right here on the screen is my front yard. That's my rain garden in front of my house. I'll talk a little bit more about that, and you'll get to see a sequence of photos that I took as we were creating this rain garden. It is pretty big. It's part of a much larger planting in our front yard, and so you'll get to see that kind of come to life in a little bit here. So rain garden, if you're not familiar with rain gardens, they are low areas that are designed to capture storm water and allow it to soak into the ground. It could be a natural low area, or it could be one that is engineered to be a catchment basin. We plant rain gardens in order to decrease erosion from the stormwater traveling over land. They also decrease the volume and pollution of stormwater entering a stormwater system and eventually a water body where it is receiving that stormwater, and therefore increases the water quality of that receiving water body as well. We generally want these to be at least 10 feet from a structure and have an engineered overflow point that is away from the structure. So if it does fill up all the way with stormwater, you don't want it running back toward the structure. You want it to go away. And they can be designed to accomplish a lot of different goals. One of those, of course, is aesthetics. Any type of garden, people are usually thinking about aesthetics. You can design them for wildlife value to attract butterflies, bees, birds, whatever it might be that you're trying to attract. They can be effective in managing basement moisture issues or foundation problems. This is actually a picture from my old house where we had a basement wall that was always wet. This is a longer story, but I'll just say we had a basement contractor quote us $9,900 to fix our wet wall and wet basement issue. We decided to create a rain garden and put 2 rain barrels in that had overflows that led to the rain garden. And our wall dried up about 6 weeks later. We never had any issues from that moisture in the basement after that. So it was a very effective tool that was a lot cheaper than using the typical basement contractor's method. Water quality improvements are a big focus of rain gardens as well, or any kind of bioswale. This is, again, designed to capture the water, so it allows for sediment and pollutants to be settled out and filtered out before they enter a receiving waterway. This is an example of a place that could use a little bit of green infrastructure there, and maybe some rain gardens or a swale. You can see the green fertilized lawns there that slope down to the water. This is in northeast Wisconsin, heavy soils here, and based on what you see in the lake there, you can see that the lake is receiving a lot of nutrients from the landscape. There's a lot of filamentous algae that have accumulated on the aquatic plants there, and this lake actually was recently in the news for having a fish kill, likely from the nutrients accumulated in the lake. So if we think about the landscape before development was really common around Wisconsin, we had a lot of forested areas with multiple levels of vegetation. We had high spots and low spots and lots of opportunities for the energy from falling rain to be absorbed, and also the water to pool in different areas and slowly soak into the ground. So after development, we end up with a lot of compacted soils, a lot of flat ground, not much vegetation, and we end up with a lot of surface runoff compared to water soaking into the groundwater and then entering waterways. The US EPA did a study on stormwater pollution and found that 70% of all water pollution is caused by stormwater runoff carrying those pollutants to our waterways. And that could be anything from fertilizers or pesticides on lawns. It could be dog waste. It could be asphalt roof particles. It could be zinc or cadmium from steel roofs. It could be brake dust from the driveway. All of those things tend to collect with stormwater and run downhill. And unfortunately for our waterways, they are at the bottom of the landscape. And so they receive a lot of these pollutants off of the land. So one thing we can all do as an individual is capture our property's stormwater on site instead of letting it go down into a stormwater system or into a local waterway. So if we were to make a rain garden in a typical urban environment, this is what we would see, probably a pretty flat, compacted area with some turf grass over the top. And the first thing we want to do is just to dig a hole. And we can take that soil away, or you could use that soil to create a berm around the rain garden. If it's on a sloped landscape, you could put the berm on the downslope side to increase the capacity of the rain garden. In this case, we're just going to say we took it away, we put it somewhere else. So we've got this nice hole now. We're going to add some compost to that soil. And ideally, this would be as weed-free as you can get. There are some commercial composting operations around the state where you can go buy a cubic yard or multiple cubic yards of compost or bagged compost that is pretty weed-free, and that would be the best because it leads to less maintenance later on. Then you'll want to mix that compost in, so you create a 4 to 6 inch area of soil at the base of the rain garden where it's nice and fluffy, it's easy to work, easy to plant into, and holds a little bit of extra moisture for the new plants that you're about to put in. And then you choose the plants that you want to have in there, and it looks something like this. So I have a few examples here that I kind of highlighted. The sweet black-eyed Susan, Rudbeckia subtomentosa is a really great one for any part of a rain garden. Sedges and grasses are nice to mix in there for infiltration. They have deep fibrous roots. They tend to open up a lot of drainage channels and allow for a lot of infiltration. And then in the middle, you can put some fairly wet plants in the middle. You don't want to put anything that's really a super wet plant or something that would be emerging from shallow water in the wild. The rain garden doesn't likely hold water for more than a few hours of time. So it does dry out, and you have to plant things that are pretty much appropriate for what you'd plant anywhere else on that property, because it is going to be about the same moisture level as everywhere else within a few hours of a storm. Then you can either bring the water to that site with a downspout extension or something like that to directly convey water to the rain garden, or if it's in an area where water naturally flows to or collects, then you can just have that naturally show up. In my case, I'm usually working with areas where it's somewhat close to a structure and we can use a downspout extension or some sort of direct conduit of water right to the rain garden. You do want to put in some sort of a pile of rocks there to absorb some of the energy of the falling water out of that downspout or that different kind of conduit so that you don't dig a hole right there. That's going to impact the plants that are nearby. And then water comes in and starts filling up your rain garden all the way across. Something important to note is that a rain garden is not a pond. Some of the common misconceptions or concerned about rain gardens are that they're going to breed mosquitoes. Rain gardens, if the water is ponding for a day or more, it's probably not a suitable habitat to install a rain garden. The soil is too heavy, the infiltration rate is not enough. So these are best where the soil does drain fairly well. And then you add your final touches. This is Toad. He lives in our rain garden in the front. He's got some little blue stem right outside his front door. Very nice landscaping choices there that Toad made. So here is a sequence of how our rain garden came to be, so you can kind of see how this project might move along in a typical urban environment. This is just south of the city of Stevens Point in the village of Whiting. We marked the area in our front yard with spray paint on the morning that we were planning to do this work. I had a landscaping contractor help me with the construction of the rain garden, with the digging of the material and then moving it. Because as I mentioned before, the rain garden is actually a pretty small part of the overall native planting we did in our front yard. It takes up about 70% of our front yard space, including the rain garden, but also some other large plantings and a path and some trees in there as well. So we designed this to drain about 1,100 square feet between the house and the garage. We have all that going through large gutters to one oversized downspout. It all flows out to one spot, which is the rain garden. The rain garden itself is 280 square feet. It's about 15 inches in the center if it's filled all the way up. And it's designed as a colorful screen from the road and as a butterfly habitat primarily, but of course has that other function of being a stormwater management feature as well. So this is August 1st of 2018. Later that day, you can see the front yard got torn up pretty well. Lots of people were stopping and some people were taking pictures, concerned about what was happening, I guess. Later in the day, we started planting right away, and this is 2 months later now, October 1st. You can see most of the plants are in. The berm has been created on that side of the planting with some soil that was excavated from the rain garden. The paths are in, the border is in, things like that. And then there's a downspout extension leading right to the rain garden. You can see that day there was a good rainstorm, so I do have some pooling water in the bottom of the rain garden there. This is the following season, June 21st, so it is about almost 11 months old at this point. The plants are growing really well. I will say that the reason this looks so well established at this point, less than a year later, is because I used all plugs. These were not done by seed. It was all installed by plugs that we grew in pots in our backyard in preparation for this project. And then here it is 1 year after planting. Things are very well established, blooming really well. Lots of rain coming out of the downspout there on this day. And then I went up on the roof the next day and took this picture so you could see an overhead view of what it looked like after that big storm. That was about a 1.5-inch rain event in less than a half hour. So it was coming down pretty fast. Everything held up to that really well. Luckily, we had that rock there next to the downspout extension, so it didn't dig a big hole. But everything was looking very happy the next day. This is my daughter standing in front of the rain garden after that first year. She was delivering flowers to the neighbors. We like to share our flowers with others in the neighborhood too. All right, so if I may, I'm going to rant a little bit about planting here, just for 30 seconds if you'll put up with me. I've dealt with invasive plants for more than 20 years now, and these are some of the worst offenders that we deal with in Wisconsin. And now I'm going to highlight the ones in red that we intentionally brought here for gardening purposes. And I'm just going to use this to suggest that we just use native plants if you can. We don't need to bring in more of these that we then have to pay a lot of money and deal with the ecological consequences of. So Wisconsin native plants are going to be your best option for planting a rain garden. So next I want to talk about seeds versus plugs. So seeds are certainly a cheaper option for establishing a garden, but they don't work well for rain gardens because you're talking about an area where water is collecting, water is traveling through, it's flooding, it's going to pick up seeds and redistribute them around the planting, sometimes concentrating all of them at one side. And so it really doesn't work out that well for rain gardens. In general, with any kind of planting, a seed mix is going to be much, much cheaper, but the results are going to take a lot longer and the maintenance requirements going to be a lot higher because you have little native plants that are growing there surrounded by weed seedlings, and then you have to try to thin those out to give the advantage to your plants that you put in. If you have larger plants in that you planted from plugs, then it's very easy to see that you've got this large plant that you put there, and the small ones all around it are the weed seeds. Beyond that, though, if you plant a lot of plugs, they will outcompete many of those weed seeds on their own and not require you to do the maintenance of removing the weed seeds. So I very much prefer plugs, even though they are more expensive. They do require more watering because it's a bigger plant. It loses moisture a lot faster, and sometimes it will lose water faster than the small root system can keep up. So you do have to keep watering it. I recommend every other day for a month, and then as needed after that for the first season. But I like them because they produce very fast results, as you could see in that sequence of my rain garden. And it just looks a whole lot better in terms of an urban environment where a lot of people are looking at that garden and making judgments on how they like that garden. So if you can show good results after just one season, it really makes a big difference as far as public buy-in of that project. The Healthy Lakes and Rivers program is something that we work with a lot here at Extension Lakes. And I wanted to mention this because a municipality or any organization can apply for this funding on behalf of landowners. So you could apply as a municipality for up to 25 projects on one application, and the project will fund up to $1,000 per project at a 75% cost share from the state. So it's a really nice opportunity to get money for shoreline restoration projects or rain gardens or various native plantings along lake shores or along rivers. The 5 practices that are included are the ones listed there in the lower right, including rain gardens. So if you're interested in this, check out healthylakeswi.com. You can find more information about this grant program. There is no application date. You can submit an application any day of the year. So it's really a great project, and I'd encourage you to check out that website to learn more. The last thing, I'm not sure, I think we started a little bit late, so if somebody could just tell me how many minutes I have left, that would be helpful.
You have 2 minutes and time for questions after that.
All right, perfect. The last thing I want to talk about is just some recommendations for plants that I like to put in rain gardens. So on the upper edge, remember that this is a pretty dry habitat. And so even though it's considered part of the rain garden, this is dry and generally pretty hot from the sun, especially if it slopes toward the sun. So I like to use things like nodding onion. That's the one on the left. It's an allium, a native allium species. The Tradescantia in the middle, that's the Ohio spiderwort. And butterfly weed, or Asclepias tuberosa, on the right side. It's an orange-flowered milkweed species. Those are all excellent. They can tolerate hot, dry conditions, and they're perfect for the upper edge of a rain garden. On the mid-slope of a rain garden, I like to use a lot of coneflowers. The purple coneflower on the lower left is one that most people are probably familiar with. It's a really common species you see in the horticultural trade. The one above that is a state-threatened species, the pale purple coneflower, that is available through some native plant nurseries. It has a narrower petal that droops down rather than spreading out more like the typical purple coneflower. The top center one is Rattlesnake Master. It's a really interesting member of the carrot family. Deer resistant and just extremely unique. So it's a real conversation starter when somebody sees that one in my rain garden. Very unique plant. Below that is wild geranium, very good for part shade or higher moisture areas. It does really well if there's a shade tree providing some shade in the afternoon, or taller plants on the south side or the west side from it. And then columbine on the right side, great for attracting hummingbirds and hummingbird moths. Beautiful little flower, also prefers part shade if you can give it that. And then at the bottom, I like to put in wetter things and generally taller things that are kind of an attention getter. So the New England aster on the upper left is really great. It blooms for at the end of the season, so anywhere from September through the first couple of frosts, you'll still see those purple flowers. The lower left is a bottle gentian that also likes part shade, a little bit more moisture. Top center is a Joe Pye weed. Joe Pye is a 6 foot, sometimes more than that, perennial. It's a very big plant, but it does really work well as the bottom centerpiece in a rain garden. Across the bottom, we have the swamp milkweed is the pink flower with a sweet black-eyed Susan behind it. Blue flag iris next to that. Bebb's sedge is the spiky one there toward the right. That's a short-growing sedge that is a great one for absorbing water and creating drainage channels, but also has a pretty interesting seed head. And then on the right is the monarch favorite, the Liatris ligula stylus, the meadow blazing star. Fantastic at attracting monarch butterflies and other butterflies. So at that point, I think I'm out of time, but that was my last slide. So if there are questions, I'd be happy to take those.
Excellent. Thank you. Does anybody have a question? I think I'll just start off while you're thinking about one. I guess, Paul, we have a lot of local, like county and municipal staff and some elected officials on here. So do you have any advice for them or thoughts about how they might encourage these things or even do them on their own properties?
Yeah, I think what we've had a lot of success with around here is demonstration gardens, because a lot of homeowners are a little bit reluctant to try something if they're not really experienced gardeners, especially applying for a grant or something where they're not really sure what the result is going to be. So it's really helpful to either have tours. The local Wild Ones chapter may be available to help with that. I've given several tours at my house for our Wild Ones group and other gardening groups around Stevens Point. But we have a big demonstration garden along the shoreline of Piffner Park, which is one of our biggest city parks in Stevens Point, right along the Wisconsin River. And that site in the summer sees probably a couple thousand visitors a day walking past it, biking past it, walking their dogs, rollerblading, everything. And we've had great public response to that garden, including even a local person that said, if you want to do this again at the other end of the park, I'll pay for the entire thing. He was so excited about this project. So I think that's really helpful to build public interest and public acceptance into it, and also get people interested in doing it on their own property.
Excellent. Great advice. We do have one question. Melissa, do you want to come off mute and
Yeah,
ask?
I was just wondering what was the name of that sedge that you recommended for the bottom of the rain garden?
Yep, it's called BEBS, B-E-B-B-S. Carex bebii is the scientific name.
Thank you.
And then we have another question. Where can you get a list of plants to plant?
Well, I would recommend going to some of the big native plant nurseries websites. So Prairie Moon Nursery is in Winona, Minnesota. That's one of the bigger ones that has a really extensive website. Prairie Nursery is one in Westfield, Wisconsin, and right in central Wisconsin. Both of those places have really great websites with a lot of great pictures and a lot of information about each species. So you can sort them by shade versus sun, or moisture levels, or height, bloom times. You can do that, do any of those things. So if you're looking for a particular type of plant or for a particular habitat, you can do that. So Prairie Moon and Prairie Nursery would be the two big ones.
And then last question. Many homes have sump pump and home gutters to drain storm sewer directly. Is that okay? Would a rain garden be better for the downspouts? Or would the rain garden be better for the downspouts?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Can you repeat that?
I'm sorry. Yeah. Many sump pumps and home gutters drain to the storm sewer directly. Is that okay, or would a rain garden be better for the downspouts?
Yeah, so I mean, in my case, on my property at home, we don't have any stormwater leaving our property. It all goes into a couple of different gardens. I would suggest removing as much stormwater from the stormwater system as possible. So I'm always a fan of trying to treat it on site. I realize that in some cases the soils may be too heavy, or there may be other circumstances where that it just doesn't work out if you have a really heavy rainstorm. But I would always encourage as much filtration as possible before it enters the stormwater system. So maybe you have a small rain garden that eventually overflows toward the stormwater drain, so that you can treat most small rainstorms, but maybe it gets overflowed every once in a while, and the stormwater system is kind of a backup. You'll see that a lot in retention basins, or in commercial zoned areas where they have a rain garden, and then there's an engineered overflow there that leads into a stormwater storm sewer system, just in case.
Okay. And just a quick one, just to follow up, I think maybe is it okay to put your sump pump, push your sump pump water into the rain garden?
Yes.
Discharge. Yep. Great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Maybe if there's more questions, Paul will probably be on still for a little bit and he can answer them through chat. And we have his information to reach out to him too. All right, moving right along here. Carrie is going to start us off for this next and provide a little bit of a introduction to our next presenter and the community engagement work that we've been up to.
Great.
And Carrie, thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Are you seeing my slides now?
Yes.
Took over.
Yep.
All right. Thanks, Paul, for that great presentation. And all of those native plant pictures at the end had me dreaming of warmer weather on a snowy day. So before I introduce our next speaker and our case study presentation, I want to take a few minutes to touch on the themes that you've seen the East River Collaborative follow through the past year and a half. And Julia touched on those already, really green infrastructure and community engagement. And I'll say, coming from the Nature Conservancy, as you can imagine, I have a personal interest in exploring how we can use nature-based solutions to help alleviate flooding and improve our water quality. And while great infrastructure certainly has its place in stormwater management and our everyday lives, We believe that green infrastructure and nature-based practices can bolster our resilience now and into the future, while also providing critical habitat for fish and wildlife. Our fall field tour in October focused on green infrastructure that's been implemented locally within the city of Green Bay and new water facilities. For those who participated on that tour, we hope we met our goals of showcasing some different practices, discussing the costs and benefits, and learning from each other on how we can implement and maintain this work. What you're seeing on the slide is a few pictures from our tour stops, and if you'd like to learn more about that, you can visit our website's event page. We realized early on in this work that, or perhaps some of our team always knew this, that community engagement has to be integrated into this in a meaningful way. And let me define that a little bit. We've obviously engaged with all of you, our decision makers, municipal staff, and other conservation practitioners. But many of these projects that will move the needle on flood resilience, like what Melissa presented earlier, are touching down directly in neighborhoods where people live and work. So we really want to build something lasting that also has their support and buy-in, and that of the residents around it. In the first year that the East River Collaborative was formed, we participated in a community service survey focused on the Joannes neighborhood, one which had felt the effects of flooding deeply over the years. In late 2024, we brought together a group from the East River Collaborative to go to Milwaukee for 2 days of learning about green infrastructure projects being implemented by the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewage District and their partners. While the tour showcased the projects themselves, the focus of the discussion was really around the intense community outreach being done within the neighborhoods where the projects land. And some of the pictures of our tour stops are shown on the slide, and information on that tour is also available on our website under the events tab. So as you've heard today, we've engaged with Wello to understand the residential perspectives, and we hope that the results of our residential needs assessment will also help further inform how we can best engage with those in flood impacted communities. And we look forward to keeping the goal of engaging with our residents and neighbors at the front of our East River Collaborative work. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing for a second so that I can introduce Andy Kaminsky, who is a senior project manager with the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewage District, as our case study presenter for this year's forum. Andy is going to talk about MMSD's Green Highways program and the specifics of their Beecher Overpass project, including public engagement and planning. I'm looking forward to your presentation, Andy, and I consider it an intersection, no pun intended, of those themes of green infrastructure and community engagement. And with that, thank you for being here, and I will turn it over to you.
Thanks. I'll try and share my screen now. All right. Is it sharing all right?
Yep, looks good.
All right. Then I'll quick kind of dive in some brief background on MMSD, if those aren't familiar. Dive into the Green Highways program, kind of into the Beecher Overpass, and kind of where we're at now with some post-construction monitoring that we'll be doing at the sites. And throughout the whole talk, I'll kind of bring in our approach to community engagement throughout this program and the project in particular. So a little bit about MMSD. So who do we serve? We have over 1 million customers that we serve within 29 municipalities, and that's within our 423 square mile planning area. And within our service area, we have 300 miles of MMSD sewers, over 3,000 miles of municipally owned sewers, and over 3,000 miles of private laterals that all go to our 2 wastewater treatment plants. But we don't just do wastewater treatment and conveyance. We also do flood management and focus on capturing water where it falls. That way we can keep it out of our storm sewer system. So jumping right into the Green Highways program. This program addresses stormwater runoff through innovative green infrastructure. The program's goal for each one of these projects is to treat and capture the first inch of rainfall from the impervious project area and to activate the space for public use through paths, gathering spaces, and art. However, we're unable to fund a lot of those other amenities on these sites. We can only really fund what's directly related to the stormwater improvements. So a lot of those things like those paths, their original and kind of primary purpose is for maintenance access. Both for us to gain access through being able to go on site and maintain the green infrastructure, but also for Wisconsin Department of Transportation to be able to get on site and perform their bridge inspections and do their maintenance as needed too. We have been able to integrate art on these spaces, but it's been through partnerships with other stakeholders as well. So these sites have been selected through coordination with Wisconsin Department of Transportation, City of Milwaukee, and local officials. The first project was the Marquette Overpass, followed by the site I'm presenting on today, which is the Beecher Overpass. The third and fourth sites have also been constructed, and these are the Mineral and Port Milwaukee. And we are currently working through design on the Holt Overpass. Each one of these sites have had their own RFP, their own set of bid documents that went out, and each one definitely comes with its own unique site challenges. These sites are usually sites with existing issues that can form a barrier between communities. Some of these sites have homeless encampments with various levels of safety concerns. Some have traffic patterns or unsafe pedestrian crossings, especially around some of the interchange ramps. And then some have unused green, or like you can see in that first photo, some brown space, but all have untreated runoff. The photos here are actually before construction and 4 years after construction of the first Green Highways project, which was the Marquette Overpass. These are photos that we like to show at a lot of our public engagement meetings and anytime we have a chance to interact with the public, just because I think it really highlights and shows that sometimes the vegetation does take time to develop. A lot of these projects are over larger areas, so there's a lot of times we're using seed plugs in basins, but seed elsewhere on these projects. So it does take sometimes years for these sites to come to its kind of full fruition. And these projects are built on collaboration. So we have an active partnership going with the key stakeholders that include Wisconsin Department of Transportation, City of Milwaukee, Milwaukee County, and the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewage District. So DOT typically owns the land and helps coordinate with the Federal Highway Administration. Milwaukee County helps with housing and relocation of homeless individuals on the site. We design, construct, and perform 5 years of the vegetation establishment. And then the City of Milwaukee helps perform long-term maintenance of the site. During design, we plan for several stakeholder meetings with the core agencies that are involved in the project and 3 public information meetings. The first one is usually during the alternatives analysis, the second during 50% design, and the third is when designs are finalized but before we go into construction. So these stakeholder meetings are typically with DOT, city, county, local business improvement districts, and community groups. The public information meetings are open to the public and at stages in the design where we can welcome feedback and integrate it into these critical points. Some of the feedback we look to get at these public information meetings is if there are favorite pieces to certain alternatives. When looking at that design for the 50% or the final selected alternative, what items should we consider that the neighborhood and community are familiar with that we might not see? So we've seen it on some of these projects where people have come in and said, hey, we love watching fireworks during all of the festivals at the Summerfest grounds that we can see from this area of the site. So please make sure we maintain these site views for a large group of the community that like to come here and see this. Another one was there was an area where it was known as kind of a safety issue with kind of turning around kind of a blind corner where there was a lot of overgrown vegetation, invasive species and things like that. It was just outside of the project bounds originally, but we ended up looking at it and saying, okay, yeah, we can clear this out and add a rain garden and capture even more stormwater here too. On this project, Beecher, it was a little bit different. It was one of the first overpass sites, so we actually had 2 separate contracts here, one for the planning and the alternatives analysis, and one for the design and bidding. We eventually moved away from that because we just found it to be a little bit more efficient and kind of smoother design process to keep it all under one project. The original thought was to get more designers introduced to MMSD work at the time, but when we were able to do it on this one, we also were able to get involved with some of the youth groups in the area during this planning project as well. So getting into the Beecher Overpass, kind of just framing up where it's located, it's at the Interstate 94 and at Beecher Street, just upstream of the Kinnickinnic River. So the project site was bounded by 4th Street to the east, 5th Street to the west, Beecher Street to the south, and the bridge piers to the north. Then we got a couple nice pre-construction photos here. This is an aerial of the site before construction. And you can also kind of note with this site in particular, how unsafe it might be with the interchange ramps. This was, I think, the last area of the state that was known to have scissor ramps. So there's a lot of rough crossings, and it's kind of known as a barrier between neighborhoods. And actually, through our community engagement, we acted so much with WISTOT and the community that DOT is moving forward with a project to help reduce and get rid of a lot of these scissor ramps that are so unsafe to the community. Some more existing condition photos here. You can kind of see just how sparse the vegetation is. Lots of exposed soils, very poorly drained, and maybe not as well seen here, but there's a lot of trash and debris accumulation at this site as well. So getting into some of the public engagement and planning that took place. During the meetings, we always like to talk about how we did this piece called Crime Prevention through Environmental Design, or CPTED. It's actually a multidisciplinary approach that emerged in the 1960s by criminologists and urban theories. Basically, it helps to reduce crime by shaping the built environment to influence behavior, increase natural safety, and decrease opportunities for criminal activity. It emphasized the intentional design of spaces, like buildings and landscapes, and can reduce both the incidence and fear of crime while improving the overall quality of life. So modern CPTED typically relies on the 4 foundational pillars. The first one is natural surveillance, or designing spaces to maximize visibility so users can easily see activity, discouraging concealment and crime. The second is natural access control, or guiding people naturally along intended routes, using paths, landscape cues, and placement of entry points to reduce unauthorized access. The third is territorial reinforcement, or creating a clear sense of ownership using physical and symbolic boundaries, kind of like paving changes or specific native plantings and art that signal the space is cared for and watched. And then the last one is maintenance, or image, also known as, and this helps keep spaces clean, active, and well-maintained to reinforce positive use and discourage neglect or disorder. So during our public information meetings, we made sure to include visual renderings. This helped the public see the spaces and kind of put themselves within the space. So the first photo on the left shows a structure that we added on this site. It's kind of known as the rain change structure. We'll have some other photos that are coming up, but we had a couple of downspouts that went into it, so people can actually kind of see and view the rain coming into the treatment drain of this project. And the second photo is of the paths and kind of the intersection coming off the corner intersection there. We also used bilingual presentation boards and postcards to help communicate with an audience that in public that was made up of both English and Spanish-speaking individuals. We also had a Spanish-speaking staff present at all the public information meetings to better communicate with anyone that might attend. And through that, we ended up having some very well-attended meetings as well, which was great to see. We also used highly visual overviews of the concept and its main features. And then in the meeting before we went to construction, kind of that final public information meeting, we used a visual outline of the construction phasing and any traffic impacts and future roadway configurations so that people knew what was coming with the project. And then we always like to include a project overview and timeline, along with whom to contact if anyone has more questions after coming to the public information meetings. So getting into the design and construction of the project, the main objective of the project was to reduce the runoff volume and pollutant loading while activating the space. We rerouted the freeway downspouts, created a low-maintenance, safer, and more inviting public realm, added a multi-use path, and were able to achieve the goal of capturing the first inch of rainfall from the project area. Overall, the project provided stormwater storage volume across the dry stream beds that were installed, along with a biofiltration area. We improved water quality via pretreatment and biofiltration. We made sure to select salt and low-tolerant and drought-tolerant vegetation, and stabilize the conveyance of the stormwater with the dry stream beds that were installed. So this site layout here shows the 18 downspouts, which are the blue circles that were redirected to 11 what was known as rain guardian turrets, which are the stars. Those were the pretreatment devices that I'll have a picture of in a little bit here. And those went into the 3 dry stream beds that eventually went into the bioretention basin on the east side of the site, right along 4th Street. This is just kind of a nice image showing the downspouts. They actually ended right at that steel beam originally on the site, and then we added the downspout going into the pretreatment device. And this is kind of a nice view of that pretreatment device here. So these can actually hold up to 400 pounds of sediment. So it's a nice spot for kind of the larger trash to filter out in the top grade and a place for all that sediment to go. So it's easier to go back and for the city of Milwaukee in these cases to use their vacuum trucks to vacuum those sediments out in kind of one spot rather than having it be all throughout those rock line channels. And then zooming in on that rain chain feature I kind of talked about from a previous slide. This has 2 downspouts going to it. It was sounded on helical piles for support. We did get some nice lessons learned from this structure during construction, which we'll touch on in a bit. But you can kind of note that the 2 downspouts that are going into it now are both kind of angled and not really touching each other, but meeting right inside that rain chain structure. That wasn't the original design, which I'll talk about in a little bit. This is the design for the bioretention basin. So you can kind of see that top right corner is a typical cross section that you'll usually see, where it has the engineered soil and then the pea gravel moving into the stone storage layer. In this case, we had to deal with a much shallower cross section than we usually would. Being right by the Kinnickinnic River, we had very high groundwater here. So we ended up doing kind of a cone structure with the stone storage layer. And that's where you can kind of see that stone right down the middle of the channel here. And then on the sides, slopes and kind of acting around it was the engineered soils that were almost triangles shaping down into that cone from the stone storage layer. So the thought with these, we've actually used this cross section at one other location, which was actually at the MMSD headquarters. We're also located right off a river. So over time, the kind of organic debris of the plants kind of slowly moves over and takes over that rock channel going down the middle. And then the plants keep finding their way over too. So although you kind of have that rock path right down the middle now, over time, it just becomes kind of a uniform plant community. So some nice photos of the completed site. Again, we have the biofiltration basin, kind of the path moving through the site along with the dry stream bed. And then there's also the art on those bridge piers in the background. That was done by one of the stakeholders that was involved throughout the project. So some of those lessons learned, the site did have impacted soils, so we had to line all of our stormwater features like the conveyance channels and the bioretention basin. And then for that rain chain structure I was talking about, originally we had the design for those downspouts going in as a T and kind of going down as one downspout into it. But with the 2 different bridge piers, found that the vibration and differences with those bridges moving would cause those downspouts to kind of pop off. So that's where we had to modify it to how you could see it now. And then during establishment, we always learn, especially on sites like this, where vegetation that we tried maybe doesn't work. So tried putting in some trees between the bridge decks, but between the issues with shading and maybe not getting enough water in certain events and the salt spray coming off of these, a lot of those trees just weren't able to make it. And then kind of as Carrie alluded to earlier, we did have a very large rainfall event in August of this past year. One rain gauge saw 14.5 inches of rainfall. This area was not far away from that, so we did experience over 1,000-year event here. And we were able to see how well this site was able to perform then. So given how large of a rainfall it was, we were very happy with the site's performance overall. We did experience some minor erosion and some of the rock mulch got kind of pushed off the site and overtopped the path a little bit, but overall the site was in great condition. And considering how this was a greater than 1,000-year event, and actually 5th Street at this project site had flooded completely and overtopped and kind of pushed a lot of that rock mulch that you're seeing and went through our rock channel too. So we weren't just getting the 1,000-year event from the downspouts and from the project area that was designed for, but also from the nearby streets. So again, very happy with how the site performed. And then kind of just quick getting into some of the post-construction that we've done with monitoring. So again, with these projects, partnerships are critical. So we're currently managing the five-year vegetation establishment on the site. The city of Milwaukee is maintaining the other site components, such as like when that stone ground cover kind of moves around, being able to put it back and correct some of the erosion and vacuuming out those pre-treatment devices. We've also partnered with the University of Marquette in doing some performance monitoring. So for today, we've done 2 years at the Marquette Overpass, 2 years at Beecher, and a year at Mineral. We like to do 2 years of monitoring at these sites so we can try to get duplicative results. We usually test for TMDLs, or the total suspended solids, total phosphorus, reactive phosphorus, and total coliform. And we try to monitor at each point along the treatment train, at least all that are available. So the downspout, pre-treatment device, the outlet of the rock channels, and then the underdrain of the bioretention. And this photo on this slide here is actually not of dirt, although it does look like dirt. It was leftover snow that was melting from what was dumped overhead from that bridge right over the top of the photo. So that is actually a pile of snow, and that's just how dirty and polluted some of the runoff is coming off these bridge decks. So the first project was Marquette, and so we had 2 years of monitoring at this site. The first year we monitored at 3 different points, which was the downspout, the outlet of the rock channel, and the underdrain of the bioretention. In the second year, we had another setup, so we were able to do a second downspout. And in year 1, we saw an influent TSS concentration of 233 milligrams per liter. And in year 2, the mean downspout influent TSS concentration was 772 milligrams per liter at downspout 1 and 149 milligrams per liter at downspout 2. This difference was just primarily from the different construction traffic loads that go through the different bridge decks that we picked out to pull the downspout samples from. But between the 2 years, we did see a 97% decrease through the treatment train, which was pretty consistent between the 2 years. Studies show that typical influent concentrations into a bioswale are anywhere from 45 to 78 milligrams per liter for TSS. And what we recorded for highway runoff is also pretty typical within the range of 160 to 500 milligrams per liter. So far at the Beecher Overpass, we're still waiting on our second year results. That was just finished up at the end of last year. But in the first year, we did see the mean downspout influent TSS concentration go from 281 milligrams per liter at the downspout to 49 milligrams per liter at the underdrain of the bioretention. The phosphorus concentrations had slight increases, but we're pretty confident that the total loads went down due to the infiltration on the site. So in general, we're able to include on these sites that the GI systems installed are effective at removing the total suspended solids concentration and pollutant loads. There's little to no effect on total coliform and dissolved phosphorus, and the pretreatment device and rock swales are effective at significantly reducing the total suspended solids. And the pretreatment devices are a big help when it comes to maintenance, specifically with keeping that sediment out of the rock swales. So where are we now? We're currently working through design of the Holt Overpass. We're at 50% design and actually just had our second public information meeting back on January 20th. Each of these projects offers fun new challenges with the space that we have and how we can get water to where we're able to capture and treat it. With that, I guess there's still time for any questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Andy. We do have about 4 or 5 minutes available for questions. So feel free to raise your hand or put questions in the chat. And maybe I'll just kick us off while folks are thinking, although I see Julia's hand is up. All right, she's passing it to me. I'm just curious, with the integration of kind of those walking paths and things under there, do you see the public kind of using these spaces, engaging with the art, and maybe asking questions of you guys, like what's going on here?
Yeah, so depending on the site, because we've done a few of these, so some have had more activity than others. This one we do see some people walk through, but I think Mineral is where we've seen kind of the most activation. And actually directly across from that project was Arts at Large. So they integrated a lot of art and have their own public engagement and their own ribbon cutting meetings and things like that at the site. So that one got a lot more busy, so to speak, and it's got a lot more activity in a positive sense, which is great. But with all these, we are seeing more public walk through it. I think with Beecher, I'm hoping once that scissor ramp project goes through, and it's a little bit safer for bikers and pedestrians to walk through, that we see that site activated more too. Right now, it's still a little hard for a lot of the public to kind of get to through all the scissor ramps, so I think that's still a little bit of a deterrent, but I'm hoping that we see more activity.
Great. Julia, did you still have a question?
Sure, I'll ask a question since to keep this going. I guess in terms of community engagement and lessons learned, you know, those underpasses are pretty sensitive areas with unhoused folks. So what were some lessons learned, or like what went well, or what would you do differently? Or just general, you know, recommendations for working with the community to build these projects?
Yeah, so I think what goes well is really working with each group and the partnerships that we have. So like Milwaukee County, because they have everything built out, they do a great job with working with those individuals on site and trying to get them into housing. So when we have a project and we're starting to kind of enter that planning phase and things like that, we're starting to work with Milwaukee County and DOT right away to make sure that this site will be ready when we get to construction. So, I mean, they're always active in trying to help these people on these sites. But when we kind of identify a site that we're going to do one of these projects on, then they're a little more active at that space in particular, because they want to make sure that people aren't going to be there when it's unsafe during construction and things like that. With the public engagement, I think having the Spanish speakers and all that's been a really nice critical part. Sometimes they're not needed, but sometimes when they are, it's key to have that person there and be able to communicate with everyone that's coming through and has interest in these projects. So getting the postcards out and getting people interested in these projects. I know we've got public information meetings for some of our other projects, and attendance can be sometimes 5 to 10 people. And a lot of these projects, I think, has spurred more interest, which is great, because I think when we did Beecher, we had 75 people attending each one of them. So it's still a pretty good magnitude difference compared to some of our other projects. So for us, we were real happy with the turnout in each one of those meetings. And it's a lot of interested people coming through. So we usually have kind of boards set up and have it open house style, so we can interact and talk with everybody as they come through and answer any questions that they have. Rather than just kind of giving a presentation and making it around our schedule. We have people come whenever it's open to their schedule. We usually have a kind of open house for over 3 hours. So we get a pretty constant flow of people through that full time then, which is nice.
With the meetings that saw turnout of 75 or that many people, was there something you think you did differently in advertising that or reaching those people maybe than other ones?
For most of the highways projects, I think we usually get at least 30 people. So in general, we usually have a pretty good turnout. Our last one on January 20th, I think it was about 3 degrees outside. So we were pretty worried with people showing up, but I think we still ended up with right around 30 people. So pretty happy with people coming out in the cold to see us and see our project and what we're planning. But I think when we had those 75 people with this Beecher project, we had people that were also pretty curious on, and some maybe that were a little annoyed with the scissor ramps in hopes that we could change. But having them come out and have for those communications where we also had DOT present, help DOT push forward with the project that they're doing now. I think it's planned for next year to replace and change some of those scissor ramps to make it a safer interchange.
Great. All right. Well, we are right on time. I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat or hands raised. Just giving it a second. All right. In that case, I'm going to say thank you, Andy, again for that presentation and for sharing that with us. And I'm going to turn it back over to Julia for a couple announcements before we wrap up.
All right, you get to hear from me one last time. I just wanted to make some announcements about conferences. We have a couple, we have one local conference coming up, the Fox Wolf Watershed Alliance Conference. It's at Lambeau Field, March. Registration is open for that. There's the Wetland Science Conference in the Dells this year, later this month. And then a big one is, which is very pertinent to this audience, is the Association for State Floodplain Managers National Conference will be in Milwaukee this year. This is a really unique situation. And it's on May 31st through June. I'm helping coordinate all the amazing tours of part of this. Adam Beckley is leading, and Jake from the Wisconsin Coastal Program is leading one of the amazing tours. And what's even better news is that there's scholarships available. So if you are a local, county, municipal, or a nonprofit person who really wants to learn more about floodplains, and there are scholarships available that will cover registration, which is very, very unusual and very, I don't know, it's great. So if I sent out an email to our listserv a week or so ago about the scholarships, if you're not on our listserv, let's get you on there. It's a Google group. You can reach out to me. If you're interested in the scholarships in general, I can reach out to my email and then I will give you some information. And I highly recommend people take advantage of this because it's not often that local people can go to a national conference like this, especially with a scholarship. So I think also I will just mention that we have, in lieu of a survey, which we all love, right? And in lieu of the survey, we have some exit questions for folks. And all your comments throughout this event have really helped to help us in general understand how people are engaging and participating. So if you could put in, what do you find the most exciting thing about the East River Collaborative work? And what are you most excited about moving forward? And then any reflections or comments you have about this event would be really helpful for our team moving forward. And over to you, Carrie. Thanks so much, everybody.
Yeah. So yeah, feel free to put any comments you have in the chat, and I'm going to take us home with our last minute here. So this is wrapping up our 6th annual Winter Forum. I want to thank all of our speakers for sharing the knowledge and work with us. I want to thank my fellow core team members for all of the planning and tech work that happens in the background that you guys don't see, but it's a little crazy. And I really want to thank my co-MC Julia for her emotional support and making it so that I didn't have to be in the spotlight for this whole meeting. I also want to thank our current funders for their support, the Fund for Lake Michigan, Wisconsin Coastal Management Program, and the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. That funding really makes all of this possible. As you've noticed, today's forum has been recorded, so all of our participants will receive a link to that recording when it's available, should you want to revisit something that you learned today. We'll also be capturing the questions and answers from the chat to be shared out as well. And as Julia said, we're always open to feedback on this event, and please reach out to me directly if you have comments or suggestions for the future. So with that, I am right on time at 11:30. Thank you all for attending. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to continuing our work together. Thank you, everyone.